sleep is not an optional extra, it's a biological necessity. And I think when you understand exactly what goes on in your body and brain when you go to sleep, you will understand why sleep deprivation can have such detrimental consequences, both in the short term and the long term. Because the reality is, when you go to sleep, your body goes to work. I think in the short term, we all know the consequences of not sleeping enough. What's your energy like the morning after you haven't slept? What's your concentration like? What are you craving to eat? Are you craving fruit and vegetables, or are you craving sugary and fatty foods? What are your relationships like with your partner, with your children, with your work colleagues when you haven't slept? What we've learned over the last 5 or 10 years is that chronic sleep deprivation, okay, not the odd night here or there, we can all cope with that. I'm talking about sleep deprivation over a period of weeks, months, and years, is causative of, not just associated with, things like heart attacks, strokes, dementia, and even many mental health problems like depression and anxiety. Not sleeping enough increases levels of inflammation, which in turn increases your risk of all kinds of health problems. Sleep deprivation also plays havoc with your hormone levels. I mean, two that come to mind are leptin and ghrelin, the satiety hormone and the hunger hormone. The night after you haven't slept, you never feel full, and you're always feeling hungry because of the way your hormones have been affected. In fact, we know from some really good research that if you sleep about 5 hours a night compared to about 8 hours a night, on average, you consume about 22% more calories the following day. Now, just think about that for a minute. That means 5 nights of sleep deprivation leads you to eat a whole extra day's worth of calories. So actually, for many of my patients who are trying to lose excess weight, sometimes all I do is help them sleep better, and without actually changing their diet, they start to lose weight. My whole approach around health and longevity is to help people get to the root cause of their problems, and sleep deprivation is a root cause of so many different problems. So darkness is actually a signal to your body that it's time to rest and prepare itself for sleep. But when we expose ourselves to these bright lights in the evening, we basically disrupt that signal. In fact, if you're looking at bright lights in the evening, and the truth is most of the bright light we're exposed to is coming from our screens these days, you're basically sending your body a signal that it's time to be awake. So how can you reduce your light exposure in the evenings? In my own life, literally just 3 months ago, we got dimmer lights put into our bathrooms. Why? Well, many modern bathrooms these days are full of bright LED lights. And I was finding I was doing all the right things. And then you go to brush your teeth before bed, and what happens? You're exposing yourself to all this bright artificial light. So we put a dimmer switch in. So when I go to brush my teeth now, I put the lights right down. Quite a few years ago now, when my kids were little, they really liked having a night light on when they were going to sleep. So we had this white night light. And at that time, I started to read research on blue light and red light, and I learned how red and amber light has very little effect on our body's circadian rhythm. So remember, it only cost me a few pounds, a really cheap red light I bought, and I put in their rooms. It was absolutely incredible. Both of my kids slept for about an hour longer the following day, and that continued for weeks. So simply by not having that white light in their bedroom at night, changing it to red light, that started to improve their own sleep quality. So myself in my own house now, in my bedside lamps, we have very low light amber bulbs. So when I'm reading in bed, last thing at night, the lighting is very dim, it's very warm. And again, it helps that signal, it helps teach the body that now it's rest and relaxation time. Very soon, you're going to be in a deep, relaxing sleep. Now, of course, when it comes to light exposure in the evenings, I've got to mention screens. I know you may like to unwind on your phone or on your laptop. I get it, it's tempting. But for many of us, the act of doing that really is playing havoc with our sleep. Now, what is it that those screens are doing? Well, there's two things really. One is the light exposure. There's quite a bit of evidence now suggesting that if we look at those screens, there's a particular wavelength of light called blue light that goes into our eyes, goes into our bodies, which can affect the release of a really important hormone called melatonin. When you expose yourself to morning light in the morning, you set a countdown of 16 hours after which that melatonin gets released in the evening. It's very important for sleep. But if you're looking at bright screens in the evening, you're actually delaying the release of melatonin, which means you're going to find it harder to fall asleep. And that's why trying to cut out those screens or reduce them a little bit as much as you can make a difference. In fact, the blue wavelength of light, which we get from these devices, in nature, you only see that wavelength pretty much in the morning and early afternoon. You don't see it after sunset. So you think about what message your body is getting when you give it those bright lights in the evening. It's basically getting a signal that it never gets in nature, which is one of the reasons why so many of us struggle to sleep. I myself am a big fan of these blue light blocking glasses. I don't think they're for everyone. And I think, if I'm completely honest and we look at the scientific research, I don't think we have a clear-cut idea yet. But what I can tell you in my own life, and for many of my patients, wearing them in the evening, if you do have to look at screens, can be really, really helpful. So that's something you can think about doing. But I still think the best thing, if we can, is to get off those screens. But it's not just the light. Remember what I said about emotional stimulation. Think about if you are looking at those screens, it's not just the light, it's also what are you consuming? Are you getting into an argument on social media? Are you allowing someone's comment to really trigger you, get you upset and worked up? If you are, think about the signals you're sending to your body when you do that. Are you sending your body a signal that it's time to switch off and rest? Or are you actually putting your body in fight or flight, in defense, in stress mode because of that comment? And that's why the truth is, for many of us, we're better off not looking at screens in that immediate period before bed. But as I say, you've got to do what works for you. And one thing that has been really, really helpful is not bringing my phone into my bedroom. I know it sounds simple, but it's so, so effective. So if your smartphone is in another room and you're already in bed, the chances that you're going to get out of bed, walk into the other room and get that phone just to scroll go down dramatically. You could just buy an alarm clock like we used to do. And I know this sounds simple. And here's the funny thing, 20 years ago, you didn't need this advice. Right, 20 years ago, because we didn't have these smartphones, everyone who needed to get up at a set time for work had an alarm clock. It wasn't abnormal, it was what most people did. Whereas now we've got conditioned to the fact that we can't have an alarm clock, it's our smartphone. I can tell you, if you're not sleeping well and you really want to prioritize it, I'd really encourage you to think about it. Can you leave that phone outside of your bedroom? It may be hard at first, you may have to start small, but I promise you, when you do, you'll find all kinds of benefits. Another thing to think about when we're thinking about our sleep quality and we're thinking about creating that ideal bedtime routine is food. Now, a lot of people don't realize that if you have a heavy meal just before bed, that may well be affecting the quality of your sleep. And why is that? Well, the body can only do so much at any one time. Right, so you have a heavy meal, it's going to take your body 2, maybe even 3 hours to actually digest that food. So its attention and energy is on digestion. It's not on rest and relaxation. And that's why we know quite clearly that most people do better with their sleep when they're not eating their dinner 2 or ideally even 3 hours before bed. Now, again, I appreciate, depending on your work, that may or may not be possible. The point I'm trying to make is if you can increase that window a little bit, you're likely to see benefits for your sleep. So let's say at the moment you're eating half an hour before bed. Well, can you move that to an hour before bed? Can you push it up to 90 minutes before bed? Because these things really do make a difference. It's a really common sleep complaint these days is that people wake up maybe 3 or 4 hours after they've gone to bed and they struggle to get back to sleep. Now, of course, there can be many reasons for that, but one of the commonest reasons I see is that they've had a high sugar snack just before they went to bed. Now, if you've seen my lessons on nutrition already, you will know a little bit about blood sugar, but this is what happens in many of us if we have a high sugar snack before bed, our blood sugar starts to go up, and 2 to 3 hours later, our blood sugar starts to crash and come down rapidly. And when your blood sugar starts to come down, that is a stress signal to your body, and your body responds with stress. And for many of us, that's what wakes us up. So actually what I found with many of my patients who were doing that, either I want them to not snack before bed, or if they insist on having a snack, I want them to have a snack that's full of protein or healthy fats, something that won't send their sugar rocketing up and then plummeting down. That could be nuts. It could be carrots and hummus. It could be some olives or even something like an avocado. But that small change can really make a big difference. Another practice that I found really helpful for people in the lead up towards bed is the power of gratitude. But the reason why it's particularly good in the evenings is because it helps direct your attention away from the negative and towards the positive. And I think all of us, no matter how difficult or busy our lives are, there's always something good that's happened. Whether it's something simple like the barista making us a nice cup of coffee that morning, or someone holding the door open for you at work, whatever it might be. So you don't need to overcomplicate this. A really simple practice is just before bed, in a journal, if you want, write down 3 things that you're grateful for, or 3 things that went well in your day. It's very simple, but really, really effective.